The more I watch Georgia's tape, the more I think they're winning another national championship this year. Now, those aren't my words. Those are the words of Jim Nagy, executive director of the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Now, Jim has seen a lot of teams over the years and a lot of players. And last season, regardless of how we feel about it here in Dog Nation, Jim looked at Michigan and said, yeah, that's a veteran team, but they seem to be really good where they need to be really good, which is along the lines of scrimmage. So when I heard Jim step up this year and say this about the Dogs and what they had returning along the offensive line, along with everything else that they have on the roster, well, needless to say, my ears perked up a little bit. Because it's one thing to be inside the bubble, inside the echo chamber, and just think that everything's always all good about the Dogs. Now, if you've been here, then you know I try not to do that. But at the same time, I'm really not going to try to sink everybody's hopes headed into the season either. But when you have voices, national voices that NFL executives listen to, talking about what they see on the Dogs roster heading into 24, again, it's worth paying attention to. But we'll talk more about Jim and what he had to say a little bit later. First off, I want to say thanks to everybody for being in here with me for another edition of How About That Dogscast. Because this is where we come to keep it real and actually talk about the things that are going to impact the season. There's not a lot of fluff around here. We're not really going to talk about things outside the conference or away from the Dogs. We're going to focus on the Dogs. And along with what Jim said, one of the other things that really got my attention recently was when Kirby Smart said some things about the running back room in Athens this year. And I think back to last season, the Dogs were hit by just a myriad of injuries at the running back position. And regardless of how well they recruit, and regardless of Georgia's next man up mentality, it hurt them, especially early in the year. Now, there were guys that stepped up. Cash Jones did great work for the Dogs last year. Dylan Bell left his number one position at wide receiver and came down to play running back because the Dogs needed him there. That's a team me guy making a team me move. But if he's at running back, Dylan Bell can't be at wide receiver. If Cash Jones is playing, that means that last season Kendall Milton wasn't, or Branson Robinson wasn't. And those guys were 5-star and 4-star recruits at the running back position. But when they're hurt, you do what you got to do. You move forward. It's because of the talent and the depth in the offensive line and the other weapons that Georgia had that they were able to navigate those early season running back room issues. Now, little did we know that later in the year, wide receiver was going to be the issue. That tight end was going to be the issue. Injuries are going to happen in football. That's just part of the game. So knowing all of that, when I hear what Jim Nagy had to say, when I hear what Kirby Smart had to say about the running back room heading into 24, yeah, I stopped and gave it a second thought. So much so that I thought I ought to come in here and share what I was thinking with you guys about it. Because it's not just the running back room. It's not just the offensive line. This entire offense could very well be Kirby Smart's best and most talented offense during his time in Athens. Now, that's a big statement. When you go back and look statistically at the 21 and then especially the 22 season under Todd Monken and Stetson Bennett and all of those dudes, they were averaging over 40 points a game, right at 500 yards of offense, and they knocked out back-to-back national championships. Well, if you stay on that trail, you'll see that last season, Carson Beck and Coach Bobo, even with the transfer additions of Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas last season, they just kept rolling right along. Now, the consistency there, the consistent part of that offense was, of course, Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, and then they've moved on. But that's what happens. That's where we say we're going to trust Kirby Smart. We're going to trust what he does, that he knows how to recruit his team. And that's why we believe that there are players behind those players that are going to be able to fill the gaps just like they've always done in Athens. So yeah, it's not just the running back room. It's not just the offensive line that I'm going to talk about tonight. But I want to drive home the point that the offensive line is where it all starts, especially in the SEC. We all know this. Offensive and defensive lines are where we make our hay. That's how the Dogs won back-to-back national championships. Pick a great team. Doesn't matter. Michigan last year, fantastic on the fronts. Alabama in years past, fantastic along the fronts. That's where it happens. But that's why I think when you take those two rooms and look at them in conjunction with everything else that Georgia has going on the roster, especially on offense, knowing that traditionally they're going to be really good on defense, you can look at this team and get pretty excited. That's what Jim Nagy did. It's not just one thing, it's everything. And it's how it all fits together. So let's look at all of that other stuff just a little bit. Let's walk through it. I mean, of course, I've spent a lot of time talking about Carson Beck and what he brings to the offense here for Georgia in 2024. We all know that it's now his team. Every report says this is the guy that the people are going to follow. When I talked to Carson at SEC Media Days, he told me as much to my face. If you haven't seen that video, you can find it. It's over on my TikTok account. He says, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm the guy this year that is not going to let Georgia lose. Now, of course, it's not a one-man game. Everybody has to play well. But the bigger point here is that Carson is taking that on as the guy when things get hard, he's going to be the one who steps up and grabs somebody by the face mask or gets in their ear or offers them encouragement or whatever it takes in the moment to get that win. He's going to do all he can do, and he feels comfortable in that role. We talked a lot about the fact that he's a Heisman favorite this year heading into the season, that he could set all sorts of records for Georgia this year passing, that this offense as a whole could set records. It's all dependent on the most important player in college football, which I recently went on record and said that is Carson Beck for what he means to this program this year. If you think for just a second, and I know it's a black thought, but if you think about it, what if Carson isn't the guy? What if the Dogs have to play with somebody else under center? They're still going to be a really good team, but they're not going to be the same. So we know that the QB position is in good hands with Carson Beck. What else? Well, the wide receivers. We know there's been some turnover at wide receiver, some of it by choice, some of it not so much by choice. A few people jumped into the portal. They took off for greener pastures. Good luck to them. Then you had the Ra Thomas incident where he's no longer with the team. He shouldn't be, based on what we know. That doesn't mean that this wide receiver room is somehow now not a weapon, not a threat, or a major point of concern for the Dogs. In fact, people still look at that room and say, thanks to the depth that they have recruited, thanks to the way Georgia plays offense, thanks to the people that they have coming back that they know they can count on, this wide receiver group could be the most talented wide receiver group in the history of Georgia football, not just Kirby Smart's years. You're like, wait a minute, didn't A.J. Green play at Athens? Yeah. Didn't George Pickens play in Athens? Yes. But when you looked at those rooms, those dudes were the alphas. Who else was out there to really do some heavy lifting and help them? No one. At least not the way it shook out. We might have all thought that's what could happen, but it didn't. So now when you look at this room and you look at how the production was spread out over the guys that are lining up at wide receiver last season, and what we know based on what we've seen in spring, what we've heard about in fall camp, what we expect to see when this season begins, this wide receiver room is going to be a multi-headed monster. And when you've got a quarterback that can process defenses the way Carson Beck can, move through his progressions, and then put the ball where he wants it as one of the most accurate passers in the country, that is exciting if you're a Georgia Bulldogs fan and scary if you are a defensive coordinator or a fan of another team. But they're not alone. It's not just the wide receivers. Of course, we have to lump the tight ends into this discussion too. Now, when you look at tight end, they have plenty of bodies. This year, I think Oscar Delp is going to have a big old season. I think he is going to be very productive in the pass game. And I know that he is one of the best blocking tight ends that Georgia's had in recent memory. Now, no one is Darnell Washington, okay? That was like having another offensive tackle lined up out there at tight end simply because of his size. But the effort and the work that Delp has put into it, coupled with the fact that he's upped his size to be much bigger than he was when he first arrived on campus, Oscar Delp has a big season loading, in my opinion. The thing is, he's backed up right now by Lawson Lucky, who is no slouch in the pass game himself. Lawson, in high school, was a guy that was flexed out more as more of a wide receiver, so it took him some time to put on the weight and develop the attitude that was necessary to get in there and block in the box the way Georgia utilizes their tight ends. But he did all that, and he still maintained his pass-catching abilities. The thing about Lawson Lucky, in case you didn't remember, is that he is a legacy at Georgia. His father played at Georgia, along with his father's brothers. And Lawson prides himself on being very physical. Like I said, he had to get a little more weight in the seat of his britches before he could actually execute that consistently for Georgia. But he's done that work. And now he's ready to make an impact. So yeah, I think Oscar Delp is going to have a big year for the Dogs. But I think Lawson Lucky is going to make a lot of big plays for Georgia this year in a lot of different ways. And of course, we can't forget Ben Yurosek, the transfer in from Stanford. Everybody seems to be talking about him and what he brings to the offense. Great ball skills when the ball's in the air. But they're not alone. There's even more than that. They have bodies. Depth at the wide receiver and the tight end position right now is very good, and all those dudes can play. So you got Carson Beck, you got the wide receivers, you've got the tight ends. So what is it that I'm talking about this evening? Why did I want to do this episode? I wanted to do this episode in particular because I'm going to circle back to what I said just a few minutes ago. It is about the lines of scrimmage in the SEC. It is about the lines of scrimmage and being multiple and explosive on offense in the new playoff format if you are going to compete and potentially win a national title. So that means it all starts at the offensive line. But more than that, Georgia has an opportunity this year to showcase something they haven't been able to showcase in the last few years. What do I mean? What am I saying? What am I talking about? Let's look at what got my attention from Kirby Smart just a few days ago. I think we've got a room of good backs that are as talented as we've had, but inexperienced. Think about that for a second. A room of good backs that are as talented as we've had. Friends, that's a hell of a statement. Think about who has carried the rock at Georgia under Kirby Smart. Let me remind you. That's Nick and Sony. That's DeAndre Swift. We can't forget about James Cook, Zamir White, Kenny McIntosh. There was some overlap among those players, okay? Nick and Sub were there together. Nick and Sony were there together. Then DeAndre Swift joined them. And as Swift was finishing up, here comes James Cook and Zamir White in as a pair. Then you had Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton there together. Yet Kirby is looking at this group that you see on the screen, and he's saying that Nate Frazier, that Roderick Robinson, that Trevor Etienne, that Branson Robinson, and there are more. The list goes on. He's saying that this room is providing the Dogs going into the season with a level of depth and talent and explosiveness, that being the key word, that we have not seen from a Georgia running back room over the last few years. Think about all the big plays, all the touchdowns, all the key moments that those dudes stepped up. And Kirby, who does nothing without intention, he does nothing if he's not doing it on purpose, stepped up to the mic and said, these guys, as a unit, as a room, are as good as any that we have had. We just talked about Carson Beck and the wide receiver core and the tight end unit. Then we look at this running back group and think to ourselves, what makes an offense explosive? It's the ability to be balanced. How do you get explosive plays in the pass game if you're Georgia's offense? You do it off of play action. This running back room is going to force defenses to pay attention to what they're doing, both in the run game and in the pass game. Some of Etienne's best plays last season came in the pass game. And given the kind of bodies and the kind of players and the kind of system that Georgia runs, there is a very real opportunity this season for the Dogs to take those 10, 12-yard runs that they've been getting, which are great, and now turn them into 30, 40, 50-yard runs because of the kind of talent that they have in the running back room heading into 2024. It's not just one guy. There are several guys that have the ability to house it. That is ultra exciting. But as good as any running back can be, I don't care if you're Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Barry Sanders. Ultimately, you are only as good as your offensive line. And that brings me right back to where we started, which was Jim Nagy's statement about what the Dogs have on the offensive line here heading into 2024 and why he is so high on them. Remember, Jim Nagy is the executive director of the Senior Bowl. So he's seen players. He talks to NFL executives all the time. This is a guy that people listen to. The more I watch Georgia's tape, the more I think they're winning another national championship this year. Now, that was just the opening salvo of his statement. Here's the rest of it. It always starts up front, and they've got the best offensive line in college football. He didn't say one of. He said the best offensive line in college football. The more I watch Georgia's tape, the more I think they're winning another national championship this year. He's talking about these guys. He's talking about Monroe Freeling and Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson, Micah Morris, Ernest Green, Xavier Truss, Dylan Fairchild. I couldn't fit them all on the screen. Do you see the problem I'm having here? There is depth. There is all conference level talent all over the Georgia roster when it comes to the offensive line, and that people are taking notice. They are understanding that what Georgia has on the offensive line right now is going to cover up a lot of warts for the Dogs this year. Think back to what we saw from Carson Beck last season. Think back to the back half of the year. Look at the Mississippi game. Look at the Kentucky game, where what you see is the offensive line in a nice bow. And then 5 to 8 yards behind that offensive line, you see Carson Beck standing like a statue, clean as can be, not a stain on his uniform, surveying the field, delivering the football. Now, I'm old enough as a Gen Xer to know that's that old classic, that's that pocket passer kind of thing. That's like a Peyton Manning dream. That's what you want. That's essentially what Carson Beck is. He's that kind of player. When you give him time and space, he will pick apart a defense. His accuracy proves it. The results from last season show it. And when you're behind a group of players like the Dogs have on the offensive line this year, there's no reason to expect that that is not what it's going to look like again. Again, him being clean, him having that pocket to work in, all of that was the rule, not the exception. It's all because of this group that we see right here. Again, I can't even fit them all on the screen. Some people would say that when Amarius Mims went down last year, that is what changed the game against Alabama. Completely changed the game. This year, it looks as though we're going to be in a position to where you're not going to be as hard up if you happen to lose somebody to a rolled ankle. You're going to have another guy that you can plug and play, and it's going to make all the difference. But it's not just a pass game. These guys are great in pass pro. But it's about that run game. I put maulers on the screen here because that's the way I think about these guys. If these guys can move bodies the way we all expect that they're going to be able to, then this Georgia run game is going to reach heights it has not seen in 4 to 5 seasons. And if that is our reality in 2024, Carson Beck and that wide receiving group that we've already talked about, they are going to be, to use Coach Bobo's phrase, hell on wheels here in 2024. Pick your poison. Who are you going to stop? That's a question I don't want to have to answer if I'm a defensive coordinator. This group of players, everywhere up and down the roster, offense and defense, everything is in place for Georgia to have a wonderful season here. But I wanted to drill down on it a little bit and say, again, you've got the quarterback in place. You've got the receiving group in place. And now the Dogs have the ability, thanks to that road grading offensive line that they're going to put out there, to add an explosive running game to the mix. And if they do that, not just a running game that can get you 3 or 4 yards and it takes 3 downs to get the first down, move the chains, but a running game that can get you 30, 40, and take it to the house occasionally. You pair that with the threats that Georgia has on offense and a guy pulling the trigger of the offense in Carson Beck that will make you pay once you make a choice about what you're going to take away. It's really hard to see how this offense is not going to be a record-setting offense for the Dogs in 2024. What do I mean when I say record-setting? 40-plus points per game, averaging 500 yards per game. That's what I think we're looking at with this unit. And it's like I said in the beginning, if the Dogs actually want to go and try and win the national championship, you have to be able to score 35 plus pretty much without thinking about it. If you ask me, that's where the Dogs are. They have that ability. And if that young defense comes along the way we all hope and think that it will, guys settle into their position, everyone gets comfortable, put those two things together, and now you're talking about a team that can both win the SEC championship and make it all the way to the title game and compete for a national championship and be favored to win it come January. The run game is what's going to make this go. So that's why I wanted to talk to both of them tonight. I didn't want to talk about one and not talk about the other. I wanted to speak to both because obviously they go hand in hand. But think back to the 2021 national championship game against Alabama. In the SEC championship game, they threw the ball all over the yard. Alabama did. And Georgia did not run it as effectively as they thought they could. But then they made their way back to Indianapolis. And when it had to happen, Georgia ran the ball and made the plays that changed that game. Alabama, on the flip side of that coin, couldn't run the football that night. So when Georgia got the lead, now you're back to Alabama having to throw the ball. And then that's how we end up with Keely Ringo's pick six to ice the game, which came on the heels of James Cook breaking off like a 60-yard run, which led to a Zamir White go-ahead touchdown. Alabama gets behind. Now Keely Ringo steps up and makes that play to win the title for the Dogs. But it all happened because the run game and what happened along the lines of scrimmage shifted from the SEC championship game to the national title game. And it doesn't matter the season. It doesn't matter the game. It doesn't matter the opponent. If you are an offense that can line up and run the football and be explosive in the run game, then you're going to win more than you lose. It's just the basic football math of it all. And I think heading into 2024, this Georgia Bulldogs team is in position to do just that. And that should make all of us that wear red and black and bark at strangers feel really good about the Dogs' chances as the season draws closer and closer and closer with each passing day. The more I watch Georgia's tape, the more I think they're winning another national championship this year. That's a big statement by Jim Nagy, but he's a guy that would know. And when you've been around the sport as long as I have, and as many of you have, then you know what he's saying is true. It starts along the lines of scrimmage. And if that holds true, Georgia is in good shape to have a big year in 2024. And that, friends, is exciting. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take care of your families and your friends. And go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.